Hello everyone! In this video I'll show you how to create modal forms with Django and HTMX. The result will look like this. As you can see, the form appears in a modal dialog instead of a dedicated page. The solution I present in this video has many advantages over the one I could find on the internet. First, it doesn't depend on hyperscript, unlike HTMX's example. 2. It requires only a few lines of JavaScript. 3. It's reusable, no need to repeat the JavaScript code. 4. It supports server-side form validation. 5. It allows refreshing the page on success. 6. It can be adapted to any CSS framework. 7. It can support progressive enhancement when JavaScript is unavailable, but I won't show it in this video. We'll start from a regular Django project and add a little bit of HTMX, and finally render the forms in dialog boxes. The video is quite long because I take the time to explain every step, but you'll see that this pattern requires very few changes to your code. If you're in a hurry, I invite you to read the blog post or look at the source code I published on GitHub. You'll find the addresses in the description below. Okay, let's start. So this is the original Django application that I want to upgrade with HTMX. So as you can see on the main page, on the home page, there is a list of movies with the title, the year and the rating. We can click on edit to modify a movie, and if we try to if we save it, updates the list on the main page. Okay, and if we insert a mistake like this or like this, we see that the server returns some errors that are displayed inside the form. So this is the classic, the basic Django application. As you can see, just a note, on the first edit you can see that the server returned a 302 to redirect the browser to the home page. Let me show you that with this one. If I had a movie, Back to the Future, let's say 3, so the year is 1990, I think, and here's the rating. So let me clear this, save, and see what happened. So the browser send a post request to this URL, movies add, and the server return a 302, so that's a redirect, and it redirects to the home page. Then the browser requests the home page and it renders this updated page. So this is the classic Django form workflow. You should be familiar with this, but let's see how it works in the code. So here is the main project folder, and this is the application folder. As you can see, the URLs are set up here. This is the view that we called earlier. This is the home page and the edit view. Now let's see the views here. So the index simply renders the index HTML with the list of movies as the context. Add movie employs the classic function-based view pattern with if, request, post, etc., etc. And you can see that if the form is valid, saving the form and then redirects, that's the 302 that we saw. And if it wasn't a post request, so if it was a get or an head request, we return an empty form, then render the movie form template with the form as the context. Similarly, we have the edit movie view that is almost identical to the add movie view, except that it first gets a movie object from the database and it uses it here as the instance for the form. And that's all for this file. The models are pretty obvious. I don't think it's worth taking too much time on this. The form is also classic. It's a modal form with 3 fields, title, year, rating. And I think that's all I have to say about the Python code. Now let's see the templates. So I have a base template using the Bootstrap CSS here and the Bootstrap JavaScript here. And now if we look at the index template, you can see the title here, the table there, and here is the list of movie. So each movie is a tr row. And the movie form is roughly the same, except that I wrapped everything in a form like so. Of course I include the CSRF token, and you can see that I used method post, of course, and maybe you're not used to this. I used request.pass so that the post is made on the same URL than the get. So that's a small trick to avoid passing a new URL in the context. And you can see that I laid out the each input control as required by Bootstrap, the label, and the field is rendered here. As you can see, I'm using Widget-Twix. So Widget-Twix is a Python package that allows you to change some values for a form widget. In this case, I'm injecting the class form control and the placeholder, as you can see. Lastly, I insert here the error for each field. As you can see here, also I'm using a small trick to automatically inject the class is invalid if the class is invalid. And this is useless. I can remove this. So I know most of you are using Crispy forms to render Bootstrap compatible form. I have personally had a bad experience with Crispy form, and I prefer using laying out the HTML like this and using Widget-Twix to make the small changes that I need. So this is the original application. Let's see how we can improve it with HTMX. Let's save this. So the first thing we have to do, of course, is to inject the HTMX JavaScript in our base template. Let's take the address. So, okay, let's copy this. There. So now we have loaded the HTMX JavaScript. The first thing I want to do, just as a demonstration of what can be done with HTMX, is to load this asynchronously. So lazily load the movie list. So let's extract this, create a new template named movie list.html, and paste the code here. So here I could simply do include movie list, and it would show it will not affect the rendered site in any way. Let's check. Okay, this is still working as expected. So let's insert some HTMX in the mix. So now I want to render this in a different route. Okay, let me fix the indent here. Okay. Now let's create a new route, a new view that I will call movie list. Okay, and this will return, let's put it up there, it will be better. Okay, and let's do the same thing as in the index. Here, just render movie list with the list of movies, with the collection of movies, and now index.html doesn't need anything. So if we look at the status right now, it should be empty, right? Okay, that's to be expected. Now, the next step is going to be to load this view, the content of this view, as the page loads. So first gonna add the URL path like so, some movies. We'll call the view movie list. Movie list, okay. And we'll have to load this when the index.html is rendered. So we can do something like this: hx get. So this is an HTMX attribute that says perform a get request on this URL, and the URL will be the view named movie list. Movie list, like this. And let's see what happens now. Okay, this is still empty, but oh, it's still not working. Let's see. Movie list looks okay. Let's place a placeholder to say something like loading ... like this. So it is now, yeah, loading. So okay, I made a mistake, and you can see here that we have an error 500. Template then does not exist. Okay, I made a typo. Where is it? Views. Oh, I keep typing move. Okay, movies, movie here. Let's refresh, and now if I click, you can see that it downloads the movie list. So we can, let's see what happens in the request. So this is the original page. As soon as I click, it performs an additional query that returns only the movie rows. Okay, but now we want this to load with the page. Instead of relying on the default behavior for HTMX, we'll tell it to load when the page loads. So this is done with the hx trigger attribute, and the value of load, the event of load, will do the trick. So let's see. Refresh the page, and it works. Let's see the request that the browser made. So this is the home page, and this is the movie list. Okay. So obviously I didn't have to do this to show you how to do a dialog box, but I thought this would be an interesting introduction to HTMX. Plus, I use this pattern very often in my application, because most of the time the list that you're showing is not the only thing on the page, and sometimes you have a lot of things on the page and you want to not load to lazy load some parts. like this. And HTMX also supports other triggers. Let's see in the documentation. You can use some of them to only load the content when the part is visible. So let's see. So there is load that I used, and reveal. This is excellent if you want to do lazy loading. You see, triggered when an element is scrolled into the viewport, also useful for lazy loading. I recommend that you do that if you have a huge page with a lot of content. You can lazy load some parts so that the initial request is much lighter. So where were we? Okay, so now we have the list of movies that loads asynchronously. Let's see how we can move the form into a dialog box. The first thing we have to do is to insert a placeholder somewhere in our DOM, somewhere around here. I'm gonna look at the Bootstrap documentation to do that. Bootstrap. Okay, let's see the documentation here. Content, no, components. Take the modal, and where is the HTML? So we're gonna take only this part, because this part will be returned by the form view, and this is gonna be our placeholder. Okay, let's put it here. Gonna add the fade class so that it fades in and fades out. Okay. Oh, okay. And at some point we'll have to identify them. So let's give this element a name. So the modal will be named, will have the ID modal, and the dialog will have the ID of dialog. Okay, and for now this is empty, this is invisible to the user, so don't need to show you what it looks like. Okay, so now we have to change the form to look like a dialog. So let's add the class of, what was it, modal content, I think. Content. Yeah, modal content, then a header of modal header, modal body, modal footer. Okay, let's do this. Okay. Add modal footer. As you can see, Visual Studio Code is giving me a hard time with the shortcut. This is not my computer, so I don't have my usual setup. Okay. So this is exactly the same thing, except that it looks like a dialog. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, it looks like a dialog box, so mission accomplished. Then we have to render this piece of HTML inside the modal placeholder that we just added to the DOM. So to do that, we'll say here we'll say, when you click on add to add a movie, instead of performing a regular request, we'll use HTMX to perform the GET request for us. And since it changes the semantic of the button, let's use it. Let's use a button element. of type button. Okay, hx get. So this will instruct HTMX to perform a GET request on this URL when the user clicks on the button. And well, that's not all. We'll tell HTMX to insert the result into our placeholder. So we'll say, okay, the result, you will place it in the dialog element. As a reminder, the dialog element is here in the base document, right there. So this here, this hx target will tell HTMX to insert the content here. Insert, inject HTML here. Okay, so that's what hx target will do. Let's try and let's see how it looks. It does nothing, but it doesn't show, but we can see that the content is here, but it's wrapped in a container. Okay, that's because here we extend the base template. We shouldn't do that. And only return, let's try again, only return, yeah, the form with the modal content. This looks good. The only problem is that the modal is hidden. Maybe we can force it to show, I don't know. So let's inject a bit of JavaScript, a small piece of JavaScript that will show this dialog. So let's create a static folder and a file named dialog.js. We'll use the iffy pattern. Never know how we are supposed to do this. I think something like this. And so let's see how we are supposed to open a dialog box with JavaScript. Okay, we have to create a new dialog like this, new dialog object. I'm gonna use const modal, new bootstrap.modal, get document by ID, and as you recall, the ID is modal. Don't care about the options. So now we want to show the modal as soon as we get a response from our server that targets the modal. Let's see how we can do that with HTMX. So I'm looking for the HTMX after swap event like this, and we'll use this event. Is there any sample code? No. Okay, so we'll call htmx.on, which is a shortcut for document.addListener, and listen to the HTMX after swap event, and in the event handler we will show the modal. So modal.show. Okay, but we don't want to do that for every HTMX request. We only want to do that if I think it's detail.target. We'll check this now. Here, after swap detail element, the element that dispatches the request. So that would be the button. Okay, detail.target is the target of the request. So in our case, we only want to show the dialog if the request targets the dialog. And if that's the case, then we show the model. Let's try. Okay, not working. Oh, of course, I didn't load our static dialog.js. Where is the base? Here. Oh, sorry. Again, not my computer. Okay, here. So first we have to load the static module, and here script source equals static and the name of the file static.js. So okay, so you might be wondering why I don't use folders in my template folder. To be honest, this project doesn't give a fair representation of how I lay out my projects, my real projects. I decided to simplify everything to the maximum, so this tutorial is easier to understand, is more accessible. Again, in no way this actually represents the way I use Django in my everyday work. Okay, let's try again. Okay, still nothing. Is there an error? Yeah, no. Not found. Not found. Why? Oh, it's not static.js. It's dialog. Okay. Try again. Okay. I think Django didn't realize there was a static folder in movie collection. Let's start the server again. Retry. Okay, there we have it. Oh, it's working. So what happened? When I clicked, it performed, oh, you cannot see it, but when I clicked, it performed this HTMX request, add here, and HTMX injected the result in the dialog box here. Then it raised the event after swap. We called this event, checked that this event concerns the dialog box, and in that case we decided to show it. Okay, now we need some buttons to close the dialog box. As you can see, I'm still using the old cancel link. So when we click cancel, this performs a full navigation to the home page. Let's fix this. Let's have a look at how we're supposed to do with a modal. So okay, here is the close button. The form is here. Okay, so button, you say cancel, secondary, and yeah. So the important part here, I think, is the data bootstrap dismiss modal, which instructs bootstrap to where close the modal. Let's try. Add movie, cancel. Yeah, you can see the modal fade away, and it doesn't perform any additional request. Okay, fine. Now let's see what happens if we try to submit some things. Toy Story, for example, the year was 1986, and I really love this movie. Save. So this is still doing a full post. Here we see the server returning a redirect to the home page. We have to change this in order to use HTMX, so we'll have the dialog nicely fade away. We have to work from the form here. Instead of letting the browser do the usual work with method post and action, we say hx post and the URL. So this attribute will instruct HTMX to perform a post request with this form, with the values from this form to this URL, which is the same as the GET request. This we don't have to insert the hx trigger as we did for the lazy loading part, because there is a default trigger for each element, and in this case, for the form element, the default trigger is the submit event, which makes perfect sense. So let's see how it goes. Okay, this may be ugly. I'm not sure what we are gonna see there. Toy Story 2 year 2000. No, sorry, 1999. Okay, save, and you see what happened. It rendered the resulting page inside the model. So that's not what we want. Instead, we want the model to close and the main page to update. So let's do this one step at a time. To close the model, I found that the easiest way was to return an empty response from the view. So instead of returning the usual redirect here, I'm returning HTTP response with the status code. We could use 200, but I prefer to use 204. 204 means no content. That's the meaning of the 204. So I can see it added automatically HTTP response. Okay, and we will do the same for edit movie. And we can get rid of redirects. Okay. So this will return an empty response. We can try and see what it does. Okay, Toy Story 3. So full disclosure, I'm cheating with a sheet on the side. Okay, I don't know all the date by heart. Okay, R500. What is it? Status code. Oh, of course, because I will never understand this. Sometimes it's status, sometimes it's status code. So, okay. Okay, let's try again. Toy Story 4, and I'm happy I prepared many movies in my list. Okay, I didn't see the movie actually, but I'm guessing it's pretty good. Okay, so we can see here the success 204. There is nothing in the response, of course, because it is empty, and we see nothing on the screen. So that's because HTMX doesn't swap the content for any status code that is different from 200. In other words, it only swaps the content if the value, if the returned status is 200. Okay, now we have an empty response. As I said, HTMX doesn't swap the content. What we want to do in that case is to close the model. So let's use exactly the same trick as before. When the event after swap, or better, I would say before swap, occurs, and this event targets the dialog, and the response is empty. I'm sure there's something like this. Response, let's see. Events, request config. The request is here. Okay. I'm not perfectly familiar with HTTP request. Let's see, on MDN they will tell me what the fields are. So response, a blob, okay, or a string. So if I do response like this and I say if the response is empty, or I do something like this. So if I get an empty response that targets the dialog, I'm gonna hide the dialog. Let's try. Okay. Hit refresh. Add a movie. Okay. This time the Goonies. So that, as you can see, that's mainly movies from the 90s. No special reason. Just what I had in mind at the time I created this. And okay, doesn't work. What does it say? 2.4. I'm wondering if it actually reloaded my HTML, my JavaScript file. Come on. It did. Is it before swap? Okay, let's add some. Let's see if I spelled it right. It seems. Okay, let's see. Console.log. Okay, and we'll include the event object like this. I'm gonna do hard refresh just to be sure. Okay, I'm running out of movies there. What can I write? Jurassic Park, and that's 93. Not a big fan. Okay, so we should have something in the console before swap. Okay, so it says target is target. Okay, from modal content. Oh, of course, I let the default behavior, so it tries to replace the actual content of the form. We have to change this and tell, okay, every time we have a request from within the dialog box, we'll target this. So every time we get a request, a post, or like an hx post or hx get or anything from within the dialog, we'll ask HTMX to change the target and say this is the real target. Let's try again, and I may need to try editing some movies. Okay, the edit button is not ready yet. Let's do this, edit. So remember what I did for the add button. We have to do the same for the edit button. So I'm going to change the semantic. It's a button of type button. You know the default type for button is submit, right? So we have to change this. Button, and instead of having an href like this, we give it the hx get attribute, which will trigger an HTMX request with the get method, and we'll say that this request targets the modal. Okay. So this way I don't have to find new movies. It's not working. Why? Let's see. Clear. Okay, edit. Modal. It's not modal, it's dialog. Okay. Oh, there you go. So let's say I really love this movie. What is going to happen now? Bam! It worked. It worked. And if I refresh the page, I can see that this rating of Phantom of the Paradise was indeed updated. So I don't know what was wrong with this. You know what? Maybe I forgot to hard reload the page, so maybe it was still using the old version of dialog.js. Let's see with add movie, just to be sure. I'm gonna do a hard reload like so. Okay. Okay, another movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark. The year is 1991. And this is excellent, so 5 stars. Okay, the dialog is closing as expected. Of course, the main page is not updated instantly. We'll address this issue in a moment. And as you can see, the film was indeed added to the list. Now let's see how we can refresh the main page. Remember, here we used a trigger of load to reload, to load the document, to load this part when the page is loaded. And now we'll instruct HTMX to do the same when some event occurs. So we can do this with, I have to check the syntax. No, sorry. So reference attributes, and it was the trigger. So triggers specify the event that triggers the request. So as a reminder, we used load, and now I'm gonna use my custom event. We use this syntax from body. There, let's say trigger on load or end when my custom event occurs, and I will name my custom event something like movie list changed. Now the question is, how do we trigger this event? How do we raise this event? And I found that the easiest way to do that is to go to the view and add the special header called, let me check the documentation of HTML. Oh, it's there. Triggering via the hx trigger header. So here, use the name of the header. I think I can remove that now. And the name of the trigger of the event was movie list changed, I think. Headers. Okay. And we'll do the same. So this is the edit view there, and we'll do the same for the add movie view, like this. Okay. So in both cases, we return an empty response with the status of 2 or 4, but this time we inject a new event, a new header that will trigger a refresh of the main page. Let's try. So let's change the rating of Back to the Future 2, save, and bam, you see it's updated. We can have a look at the request so that everything is clearer. Let's increase the score, okay, to 204, and the refresh of the movies list. So only, of course, it's not refreshing the whole page, it's only returning the rows of the table. So everything seems to be working fine. Let's see what happens if we try to put some errors in the mix. Okay, the errors are correctly rendered in the form. Okay, cancel, add a movie. Okay. Okay, let's do the same here, save. Maybe with this title already exists, fine, cancel. Edit this one. Okay, I was looking for something specific that didn't occur there, but I will talk about it anyway. So what I noticed, we unfortunately cannot see it here, but what I noticed is when I do save like this, then cancel. Okay, if we look at the DOM, you can see that the dialog is still there and the error is still present in the DOM. So sometimes when you click on add a movie or open another movie, you may see, for a fraction of a second, you may see the error. That's because there is a transition, I think, in Bootstrap that fades away the invalid feedback. So it may the box here may appear red for a fraction of a second. I'm assuming maybe it comes from the fade transition. Let's see, because I know this occurs, and I have a solution that I want to show you. Okay, let's just refresh. So removing the fade class will remove the transition. Let's try. Okay, you can see no transition here. Okay, something before the invention of the cinema, not possible. Cancel. There, you saw it. It was red for a fraction of a second. I can do it again if you want to see it. Whatever, doesn't matter. Okay, so here you see the error. Look at this right there. You saw it was red for a fraction of a second. Not a big deal. Yes, it is a big deal. We have to fix this. So there is an easy fix. And this fix is to, well, once the dialog is hidden, we should get rid of the content. The solution is CSS framework specific. So in this case, it's specific to Bootstrap. Bootstrap raises an event when the dialog is finally hidden. So this event fires when the modal has finished being hidden from the user. So let's copy the name and put it there, dialog.js. So again, we'll use the HTMX shortcut. There. So when this event occurs, I want to delete to remove the content of the dialog. So get document that element by ID. We'll take our dialog and reset the content entirely like this. Okay, I'm gonna do a hard refresh again. Okay, what happened? Go back there. So hard refresh. Okay, let's see. If I try again to put a date in the past, before the invention of the cinema, okay, cancel, so the error was there when I closed. You can see the dialog is now empty. If I try to add a movie now, no problem. So we can restore the fade transition because I think it's worth it. Class model fade. Okay. And now, yeah, now all is good. Everything works as expected. And there is only a small changes, some small changes that I want to do before wrapping up this video. It's to show you there some tweaks to the dialog.js. Here you can see that I purposely didn't check the status code of true or false. That's because I want to support cases where you decided that 204 was not the right code and you prefer to use 200. So instead of checking the code, I prefer checking that the value is the response is empty. I think it's more it covers more cases. And the second thing I want to do is set is to prevent HTMX to from swapping the content in this case. So we can see that in the reference. So it was the event reference. Our event is before swap here. And here, detail.shouldSwap if the content will be swapped. Defaults to false for non-200, as I told you. So I want to set this to false. This is not absolutely required in our case because, as I told you, I'm returning 204. But if you want to return to 200, you have to say should swap false. So in this case, well, it will not. It will prevent HTMX from flushing the content of the dialog box during the transition, because when you click save, you don't want the dialog box to be empty during this fadeaway transition. So I think I covered everything. Well, I hope this was clear. There you have it. A reusable pattern to put Django forms in Modal dialog box. Let's review what we did. We are the two of the initial project. We included the HTMX JavaScript file in the base template. We lazy loaded the list of movies. We added a placeholder for the dialog box. We changed the form to look like a dialog. We injected the form into the dialog placeholder. We listened to the HTMX after swapped event to show the dialog when appropriate. We replaced the usual redirect response with an empty HTTP response. We listened to the HTMX before swap event to hide the dialog box when the response is empty. We added the HX trigger header to the response to trigger refresh of the movie list. We listened to the hidden.bs modal to flush the content of the dialog. We added some safeguard in case you want to use status 200 instead of 204. As you saw, we added very few lines to the JavaScript and they will be reused for every modal form, so the maintenance cost is very low. I've been using this pattern for a while now and I can confirm that it's easy to set up and highly reusable. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comment. Bye!